that first section so that we can put it out on just out for anybody that hasn't had a chance to be with us, and they can catch up. The first about 20 minutes, what we'd like to do is give you a presentation that we have made to administrative council and downtown leadership team, that the feedback we've gotten is very helpful. It is it's a very much a kind of the plain facts, what has taken place, how we've gotten here. And then actually we're going to look side by side. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to look side by side at the Book of Discipline, 2016 versus 2024, and see what has changed, what's been added, what's been deleted, what's been expounded upon. And then we'll have a little bit of time to talk about what the implications are and how we're addressing those. The goal for the night really is to just get you information and to tell you as much as we know now. There are a few things that we will be able to tell you for certain. There are still things that are being worked out in the details and that aren't completely finalized yet. And so we'll let you know that as well. We're going to have a question and answer time. And really, my hope is this would be more chat than it would be presentation. So we're gonna start doing this once a month for as long as we need to. And the next one will be the Wednesday at the end of annual conference. We just thought that'd be a great time to have another check-in and say, here are the things we know from annual conference, and here's the implications. The one after that, we will set for the end of jurisdictional conference. And in July, we should be able to tell you, are we getting Bishop Fairley back? Do we have another bishop coming? What is the, what are we looking at in terms of our annual conference and who will be leading it? So we've got some things that are going on, and all the while we'll continue to tell you what about the work that's going on within the work teams as well. So I wanted to we'll put an account, an info account. If I can, let me ask everybody to mute again. That would be really helpful. We'll have an info@lextogether.org, and that's an email account. So if you have questions as we're going through this, you can feel free to email, or you can just hold them, and we'll take them out. You can just raise your hand, and we'll take as many as we can. So I've asked Carol if she would start us and walk us through what we've done as a community to prepare for a general conference. And it's been very helpful just to be reminded. So Carol, it's all yours.
All right, thanks. So I'm just going to run through the process that we have done to get us to general conference, which happened beginning of May. So in all things and through all things, it has been covered in prayer. The pastoral lead team, which is made up of our 3 community pastors, which is me, Chad Foster, and Taylor Zimmerman, along with Todd Nelson, our senior pastor, and Jennifer Gibson, our church administrator, has spent many days, not only in prayer, we meet nearly every Tuesday, but time in prayer then, but also many days apart where we have committed to several hours of prayer and conversation and just spending time praying for our church, for what's happening in the United Methodist Church as a whole, but also for our local church and for each and every one of you. And along with that, all of our committees and teams spend time in prayer on this, and you all spend time in prayer. And for that, we are grateful. So know that even as I go through each of the steps that we went through, that each process through this has been covered in prayer. For over a decade, which is longer than I've been on staff with you all, the pastoral lead team has been in conversation around the United Methodist Church and our understanding of human sexuality. For several years, since before the called General Conference of 2019, the Vision team, which is made up of our 3 lay leaders, our community lay leaders, and each committee chair, along with the pastoral lead team, has been in conversation around the United Methodist Church and our understanding of human sexuality. In the summer of 2022, Taylor Zimmerman, our offerings community pastor, led this sexual theology intensive. In the fall of 2022, we offered it was held at High Street, but across the 3 communities, 3 5-week classes that included understanding, or 3 classes that lasted 5 weeks each, that included our understanding of what the early church fathers said about marriage and sexuality, digging into the biblical texts and developing a better framework and understanding around desire and asceticism. We would sit and meet with individuals at any time who wanted to talk to us. And so all of our pastoral lead team held individual meetings throughout this process. At the end of 2022 and the beginning of 2023, we began writing the theological document, and that began with the pastoral lead team. In January of 2023, we held a leaders training where we spent time around tables and discussion about where we are, what we're hearing. And again, we spent time in prayer. And this was for all leaders who were coming onto committees for the year of 23. In February of 2023, rough drafts of our theological document were given to our vision team. They tore it apart. We literally put it up on a screen and went through it line by line, and they would ask for questions, clarifications, edits, change this word, this doesn't make sense. We did this several different times. In March through April of 2023, our theological document is given to our administrative council for their questions, clarifications, and edits. And again, at times went through line by line with them. In May of 2023, our theological document was adopted by the administrative council. The document says that we will remain United Methodist unless the United Methodist stance on orthodoxy changes, which is the dogma section of our document. And I was reminded at our administrative council time that then in the fall of 2023, we taught the theological document on Wednesday evening in Sunday school classes, and again, would have individual meetings with anybody who wanted to come and talk to us about it or had questions about it. So that, I mean, just so you can see the timeline, this process has been going on for well over a decade for First United Methodist Church in Lexington alone.
Appreciate that, Carol. And I think all along we've tried to stay in a posture of learning and being able to just explore what is going on in every segment, biblically, theologically, as well as what's going on in the United Methodist Church. And so that led us to that point. And let me share my screen because I want to walk you through some details, and we will get to and we'll be able to get to what has actually changed. Let me see if I can do this without losing you all. That would not be good, would it? Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, as Carol alluded to, a full year of study and writing produced the First Church Theological Statement. It's a document to describe who we are and where we're going. And we now are in the implementation phase for the changes in the Book of Discipline around human sexuality. And tonight's goal is to understand what has changed. Now, I need to give you a little bit of Book of Discipline background. There's three major... If everybody can mute for me, that would be really helpful. So there's three major sections in our Book of Discipline, and it is kind of our guiding book. It's not the Bible, but it is how we as United Methodists have agreed that we would live and with one another and into our faith. The first section is a theological section. This section is very difficult to change. Some sections are actually impossible to change. And you're going to notice that we're going to talk about regionalization in a minute. That's one of those things that's in this top section that takes, actually, it's like changing the Constitution of the United States. It takes a vote from every annual conference that would be an aggregate 2/3 approval. There's the second part, which is the social principles. And the social principles, I'll show you a whole list of them at the end of this. There's 30 plus social principles, from everything from global warming to our stance on immigration, to our stance on abortion, and everything in between. Social principles are aspirational. This is what we hope to be as a people and that we live into. Social principles can be changed by a simple majority at General Conference, and they are not church law. I think that's really important to note. They are changeable with a simple majority at General Conference, and it's not church law. No one gets kicked out of the church in terms of clergy if you don't align with all the social principles. But they are the direction of the church, and it's important to know. The third piece is our polity, and that's church law. And for everyone outside the US, this church law section is changeable by a regional conference. So if you're in Africa and you're in a regional conference, you can get together and basically change this third section, this polity section, to match your context. For instance, you would not expect the same ordination requirements for someone who is in the US as you would parts of Africa, simply because the access to seminary training is not the same. And so there needs to be an ability to be contextual where you are. So that's why this third section, the polity section, it can't be changed, or it can be changed by any region. Now the catch is the US was not a regional conference. And so every time we wanted something changed in the church law, we had to come to general conference and to have it changed there. And that's going to set me up for what the conversation about regionalization. The first thing that changed at general conference this year is the US was pulled out and made a regional conference. What that allows for is for contextual changes to the polity section of the Book of Discipline. Meaning that if there's things in the US, and it is the US only, if there's things in the US that make sense contextually for us to better minister to the society, then we can decide that as US delegates to the regional conference, and those could become church law. Now, the issue around this regionalization was actually contained in that first section of the Book of Discipline, which it's like changing the Constitution. What happens is that every annual conference must vote, and there must be a 2/3 aggregate approval in order for regionalization to become the law of the land in the US. And that will begin to happen in 2025. This slide says 2024, but we're hearing now that we probably won't vote on regionalization in the US until 2025. And every annual conference, we're in the Kentucky Annual Conference, the Kentucky Annual Conference, North Alabama, North Carolina, all the conferences will vote. And as long as there's a 2/3 affirmation, then we'll become a regional conference. And what will happen is in 18 months, we'll have a convening regional conference. And that third section of the Book of Discipline that's up there, we can begin to make changes there to fit our context. That we thought that was possible to happen at this general conference. We really thought that was all of the changes that was possible. Little did we realize until week 2 that there was a whole lot more changes coming. Let me walk you through some of the major changes. The first is around sexuality, and what you're seeing in your screen on the left-hand side is the social principles that was part of the Book of Discipline in 2016, and then the new social principles, which became effective in 2024. And I want to walk you through what some of the changes are. Now, remember, social principles they are in that second section. They can be changed by a simple majority vote at our general conference. Around sexuality, the Book of Discipline in 2016 read this: although all persons are sexual beings, whether or not they are married, sexual relations are affirmed only with the covenant of monogamous heterosexual marriage. That is the stance that we had up until General Conference of this year. Let me just scroll just a little bit, and then we'll come back. The second piece that is noted is in 2016, the Book of Discipline read, the United Methodist Church does not condone the practice of homosexuality and considers this practice incompatible with Christian teaching. So that was 2016. In Charlotte just a couple of weeks ago, a new social principles was affirmed, and it was voted on and adopted. And let me read our new social principle on sexuality. So this is the church's aspirational, here's who we are as a people. We affirm human sexuality is a sacred gift and acknowledge that sexual intimacy contributes to fostering the emotional, spiritual, and physical well-being of individuals and to nurturing healthy sexual relationships that are grounded in love, care, and respect. Human sexuality is a healthy and natural part of life that is expressed in wonderfully diverse ways from birth to death. It is shaped by a combination of nature and nurture, heredity and genetic facts on the one hand, and childhood development and environment on the other. We further honor the diversity and choices of vocations in relation to sexuality, such as celibacy, marriage, and singleness. We support the rights of all people to exercise personal consent in sexual relationships, to make decisions about their own bodies, and be supported in those decisions to receive comprehensive sex education, to be free from sexual exploitation and violence, and to have access to adequate sexual health care. So what we've done is we've reshaped this whole section. And the big things that most people are talking about that were deleted were the two highlighted sections on the left, and that is the stance. Our social principles in 2016 basically said that sexual relationships were affirmed only when monogamous heterosexual marriage was in place. And that we had a second line that basically said the United Methodist Church does not condone the practice of homosexuality and considers this practice incompatible with Christian teaching. That language has been removed and has been replaced with what you see on the right, which is another social principle that talks about where sexuality is at this point. The two major things beyond the removal is you will notice that there is not a mention of marriage in terms of sexual activity, and that one major thing there. So that is the side-by-side look, kind of on where we were and now where we are today. Now, the important thing to know, this takes effect January 1st, 2025. So this social principle doesn't go into effect until January of 25. What you're going to see is there's a lot of different start dates that gets really confusing. I'm going to say this more than once. We do theology by Robert's Rules of Order, which is a wonderful system to kind of govern a body. It's not a particularly helpful system doing theology. And so you get some things that are implemented and that you have to come back in successive general conferences and smooth out. And so I'm fully expecting some changes, in the language as we live into this a little bit, but this is where we are right now. Now, let me talk about chargeable offenses, and this has only to do for clergy, but I think it's important difference and something for us to note. So in 2016, a clergy person, the Book of Discipline said a clergy person, which would be me, Carol, Taylor, and Chad, who are appointed, said this about a clergy person and chargeable offenses. A bishop, clergy member of an annual conference, local pastor, clergy on honorable administrative location, or a diaconal minister may be tried when charged with one or more of the following offenses: immorality, including but not limited to not being celibate in singleness or not faithful in heterosexual marriage. B, practices declared by the United Methodist Church to be incompatible with Christian teaching, including but not limited to being a self-avowed practicing homosexual, or conducting ceremonies which celebrate homosexual unions, or performing same-sex wedding ceremonies. That was a chargeable offense if clergy participated in same-sex unions or were a part of were a married gay or lesbian person practicing. You'll notice in 2016, what has changed is that whole section has been stricken that I just read. And what it reads now is a bishop, so on and so forth, can be charged with one or more of the following offenses. A, immorality. And it doesn't list necessarily what is meant by immorality, but it does restrict or it does remove any of the language around being not celibate in singleness or faithful in heterosexual marriage. It also removes any clergy being charged for being in a same-sex marriage and being actively sexually active in the same-sex marriage. So major changes in the Book of Discipline right there. Now, the social principles above, this is actually in the polity section. So these are the chargeable offenses. And you can see that at the bottom of this page, this takes effect immediately. So let me go to the next slide, and we'll start talking a little bit about marriage. And then I'm going to come back and do some overviews. But you'll see in terms of marriage, on the left-hand side, what are weddings? Book of Discipline said about weddings. Ceremonies that celebrate homosexual unions shall not be conducted by our ministers, shall not be conducted in our churches. That's what the 2016 read. The 2024, that has been stricken. So no longer does that say, and that takes effect immediately. So what this means is that clergy can begin to officiate same-sex unions, and those weddings can also be held in United Methodist churches, and it immediately that could be effective. There's been a lot of talk about, will any clergy person be mandated to participate one way or another? And there was 2 sections added, section 419 and another added to section 340, and I'll just summarize these. There can be no mandating of anyone to perform or refrain from performing a same-sex marriage. So really the Book of Discipline is saying the clergy can hold their convictions and they cannot be charged for this. Now, that takes effect January 1st, 2025. So again, we've got these conflicting dates that, but my guess is they'll, at some point, a lot of this is going to be smoothed out when we get to a regional conference. So that's the piece. The last piece I want to talk about is the social principles on marriage. And again, we're talking about back up into the social principles section, which is not the church law, but our aspirational social principles on marriage. In 2016, we said we affirm the sanctity of the marriage covenant that's expressed in love, mutual support, personal commitment, and shared fidelity between a man and a woman. The social principle, and it was changed in 2024 to read, within the church, we affirm marriage as a sacred, lifelong covenant that brings 2 people of faith, an adult man and woman of consenting age, or 2 adult persons of consenting age, into union with one another and into deeper relationship with God and the religious community. Now, let me just kind of pull back the curtain about how actually we got to this statement. The original language that was proposed for 2024 did not have an adult man and woman of consenting age in it. It basically had the 2 people of faith, of adult persons of consenting age, and that was it. There was a delegate who stood up and said, I would like to make an amendment to include an adult man and woman of consenting age. And Robert's Rules of Order, that was passed, and then they ran out of time. They called for the question, and what we left Charlotte with is this statement that has a lot of things that we've got to figure out that are not completely tied down for us. Within the church, we're not sure what that means. Is this just for church weddings? What does it mean outside? Affirm marriage as a sacred lifelong covenant that brings 2 people of faith. How do we describe 2 people of faith? Do we need to start asking for baptism certificates? And are you active in the church? Is it membership? Is it a lot of things that we've got to work through? What I want to just highlight for you is that there's a lot of things that continue to need to be refined and interpreted to even what we've been handed, which is our work ahead. But what you see is we've gone from a social principle in 2016 that basically had a marriage between one man and one woman, and now the United Methodist Church stance on marriage is really two consenting adults. That's what it boils down to. And you'll notice that this takes effect January 1st, 2025, and yet weddings can be officiated and held in the churches effective immediately. Again, we got a couple conflicting things going on, but I think grace will win out on all of that. The last thing I wanted to show you is ordination and licensing. So there's been a lot of talk about where do we stand on human sexuality. There's been a lot of talk on where do we stand in terms of marriage. There has also been a lot of questions about what exactly are we looking at in terms of ordained persons. So in 2016, to be ordained, this is the statement. They agree to exercise responsible self-control by personal habits conducive to bodily health, mental and emotional maturity, integrity in all personal relationships, fidelity in marriage, and celibacy and singleness, social responsibility and growth in grace, and the knowledge and love of God. So what our stance was, sexual orientation was not at all a part of ordination. So LGBTQ community members could absolutely serve in the church in whatever places, licensed local pastors, deacons, elders, they could be bishops, as long as celibacy and singleness, because we did not acknowledge marriage between same-sex individuals. That has changed. 2024. Now here's what we're asking for ordained or licensed local pastors. We're asking that they're faithful in sexual intimacy, expressed through fidelity, monogamy, commitment, mutual affection and respect, careful and honest communication, mutual consent, and growth in grace and in the knowledge and love of God. So what we've done is we've said that we no longer have restricted, since our definition of marriage has changed, and there's also inclusion of same-sex unions. So that has also flowed right through to the ordination process as well. And so there will be ordained persons who are in a married relationship, a same-sex married relationship, and are sexually active, and that has been adopted in 2024, and that it takes effect immediately. So we could see as early as this June and July, when annual conferences take place, that there would be ordinations of persons who are gay and married. You're going to see the last piece here, ministry of the ordained, and you're going to see that we've stricken a section that again references practice of homosexuality is incompatible with Christian teaching for the ministry of the ordained. What ends up happening is, as the Book of Discipline kind of evolves and breathes, you start to have the same sentences used in different sections kind of over and over just to reinforce the thought process. And so this section of ministry ordained, there was a large section that was taken out, but it basically had to do with the practice of homosexuality, and that's been stricken completely. And once again, this takes place immediately. Let me show you just briefly the social principles, the table of contents. So we have a preface, a preamble, like all good documents should. We have a community of all creation. That's part of our social principles: economic community, social community. Happy to share these with you. These are actually on the website. And political community. So we have stances on a variety of things. And every 4 years at General Conference, these are up for consideration and what's changed and what needs to be adopted and adapted based on what's going on in the world and our stance, how we see the gospel interacting with that. With those the issues that we're facing. Couple things I want you to see, or just to know as we think through this. I want to show you one more slide. So don't get sick here. I'm gonna try to. You may have seen this before. We've had this. We've emailed this out, and it's been at the exits to the downtown sanctuary. Basically, some newsworthy actions. We talked about regionalization. The book of discipline's been revised and replaced in sections. Here's some other major things that haven't made the news, but the entire pension system has been changed. So for clergy persons who are participating in the pension system, that is radically been changed, and we'll go from a pension to a 401k, which most people have. I mean, that's kind of a standard practice across the boards, but we're aligning the clergy with that effective in January 1st, 2026. So the current pension system that we're under will no longer be in effect, though we won't losing that. Whatever we accrued will be paid out in retirement. There just won't be further accrual, and it'll be purely a 401k system. Drastically reduced the budget. Budget was reduced 40% across the board, and that's going to have a major impact on our boards and agencies, on our oversight. A lot of things will look different within United Methodist Church going forward. We did have some increases of number of bishops in Africa. That the ministry is booming there, and just needed more people to help shepherd that ministry. And so we've added 5 new bishops in Africa, and that was exciting news. One of the things that has gone unnoticed in the news, but has not gone unnoticed in our hearts, and that is that we've changed the sacramental rites, which we are now allowing deacons to administer the sacraments in terms of baptism and celebrating communion. Before, that would have to take place only at the direction and under supervision of an elder or a licensed local pastor. And now deacons. Kyle Long is a deacon at First United Methodist Church. He's part of the offerings community, and Kyle is he's a chaplain at UK Medical Center. And up until General Conference, if he was with someone who was dying and requested communion, he could not serve that sacrament. Or if he was with someone and they accepted Christ, he could not baptize them, which is just, well, I don't have words for it all. But we recognize that was limiting his ministry and all the deacons' ministry. And so that has been changed. And so now he has every right to administer those sacraments. And it is, I'm so appreciative and excited for that. And it needed to have happened. And we did that. So how are we affected? It's going to take time to fully understand the decisions. All these changes, they'll still need to go through a review process. And if anyone pulls anything out and says, hey, I'd like judicial counsel to take a look at that, it may mean we may not know for weeks or months that everything was done in accord with Robert's Rule of Orders, in our own book of discipline. So we're not completely sure all the changes are done, but we're guessing that at some point they will be. The Administrative Council met Tuesday, May 7th, and kind of just authorized 4 work groups: a wedding policy group, clergy and appointments, children's ministry, and communications. And so all of these 4 teams, besides children's ministry, they're going to be meeting here shortly, will either have met by the night or they will be meeting shortly. But like the wedding policy team, we're going to need to redo our wedding policy in light of the changes in the United Methodist Church. And we're going to have to ask some of these questions in terms of what does within the church mean? How are we interpreting it? And what are people of faith? And some things that we just need to figure out. We'll have a work group that basically is going to work alongside administrative council. And then you'll see that as well, the congregation as a whole. The hope is to have our wedding policy done and implemented by January 1st, 2025. So there'll be lots of time for feedback. I did have a question about, is this wedding policy group going to be deciding who gets married and what happens? And that is not their role. They're going to help us implement the changes in the Book of Discipline. And they're not going to be, our theological statement has actually already set the grounds for kind of how we're living into this. Clergy and appointments, there's been a lot of conversation and questions around. So, how would we receive a clergy person who is married and gay? That is an absolute possibility in this, with the new Book of Discipline. And so we're going to staff parish and asking them, hey, let's kind of talk through this, and what do we need to do in order to prepare the church, and also to make sure that we get somebody that can align with our theological statement and knows who we are and where we're going. And also, staff parish will be working with each clergy person to gather and gain from them what exactly their convictions are around the new changes and what they are feeling led that they can do. And we'll let the congregation know that as well. We feel like we owe that to you. We've had some questions around children's ministry. What exactly are we teaching, and everything else? And the short answer and the final answer is always we teach the Bible. But I realize there's other questions around curriculum and a variety of other things. And so we're gathering a team together that will be probably a longer journey than all the rest of the teams that will just help us walk through. We need to not only begin to answer the changes within the Book of Discipline and United Methodist Church. There's changes in our students' lives and in our children's lives that we need to begin to wrestle with. We have students that are just asking some really good questions, and we want to be prepared, and we want to be a positive influence in their lives. So everything we're going to do will be in lockstep with parents. Parents will have complete control of that and know what's going on, but we want to be really sensitive and communicate, and that was going to take a while for us to work through. And I'm thinking not just months, but maybe a year or more for us. And then the last part is communications. Just how do we keep in front of you and make sure that you're fully equipped to know what's going on. Oh, that was a lot. I don't like to hear myself talk that much. We are getting some questions on the that have been emailed in. Let me see if I can stop sharing my screen here. All right, I'm back. Y'all are still there. That's so good. I didn't run you off. All right. I see David Hobson's even still awake, so I feel like that's a good sign. I really feel like that's a good sign. All right. Here are the questions. Let me just run through some, and then I'm willing to take whatever. And Carol and Jeff Fox is on here too. So, will we be conducting same-sex marriages? Same-sex marriages will be taking place at First United Methodist Church of Lexington. Yes. We have said in our theological statement that we are a place that can hold in tension these two convictions, and a place that not only will think, but will also practice in terms of what our conviction is. And so absolutely, theological statement already made that clear a year ago. And I would encourage you, read, ask questions. I would love to talk about it. I have taught through the theological statement in 4 different settings. Every last time people have come away and said, that was so helpful, and I feel so, at peace and better equipped. Will there be a vote to determine this? No, we have not. There's no need for a vote because the theological statement was adopted by the Administrative Council. And so that is already accomplished and done a year ago. We were just waiting on General Conference to see what changes were, to see what we needed to implement. And we've been saying that consistently for the last year in a variety of places. Are unions and marriages one and the same in the UMC? I use those interchangeably, and I probably shouldn't. I've been using them today to mean the same thing. So union or marriage, they're both covenants. And in terms of what my language is, other people may use them differently, but at least today I've been using them one and the same. So if I say same-sex union, what I mean is same-sex marriage. And that would be one and the same in terms of that.